So let's get on to Riley Bowman of Concealed Carry. Riley is a firearms instructor, a Master Class USPSA competitive shooter, host of Concealed Carry podcast, and the VP of concealedcarry.com. Now, that is quite a list. Quite a list. And there's even more. Wait, there's more. When I bring him on, you'll be able to hear about everything else. But I want to talk to Riley today about business training and life lessons. So, Riley, I hope that you can come on the screen here. And I don't see you. Are you there? I don't hear him either. Huh. I bet he's trying. I can't hear him. Can you guys that are watching, can you see or hear Riley right now? Tell me in the comments. He's frozen on my screen, Adam. Ruh-roh, Tori says. I can't hear you, Adam. Nope. Oh, there he is.
There we go. Welcome, Riley. And I'll jump out of the screen.
Are you there, Riley? I can't hear you. I still can't hear you. Well, we can see you now, so that's good. Can you do sign language? Can anyone else hear Riley? No sound. That's problematic for an interview.
Are jumping.
Oh, there he is. There he is. I
can
hear you. Can you hear me, Riley?
I hear you fine.
Oh, thank God. Hallelujah. All right. Well, I think we're good to go now. Well, welcome to the show. I hope you didn't mind that long tidbit there in the beginning. Riley, I believe, is at a Thanksgiving get-together, and he had to come in at the last minute, which is why we couldn't do his audio video setup thing. So you're kind of on the fly today, huh?
I am definitely on the fly. I apologize for coming in right at the last minute.
That's okay. That's all right. Well, we can roll with the punches. We're a good group to do that with, so no big deal. So, all right. So I did my best to introduce you, Riley, but I've never met you. I don't know you, so I'm so glad that you're on the show. So go ahead, tell us about your background as a shooter, and as a business person for those that don't know you.
Well, I got into shooting other than like your typical go out in the backyard or on the farm and, shoot type stuff. I got into it more seriously about the time my son was born, my oldest son. At least that sort of began the journey, because for the first time in my life, I realized, oh, I've got, a little person besides me and my wife that I'm now really, truly responsible for, that can't do anything of his own accord, and is dependent on me and on my wife. So I started getting a little bit more serious about it at that time. That was 16 years ago now.
Wow.
And then about 12 years ago, I started pursuing becoming an instructor, and mostly just taught like concealed carry classes. Later on, started doing some defensive handgun kind of stuff, and got into law enforcement around that same time as well, as a reserve. Did that for 7.5, 8 years, somewhere in that ballpark in Colorado. And then, just pursued all the opportunities I could. Around about 6, 7, 8 years ago is when I really started getting really passionate about training, about trying to take it to the next level for me personally. And so I kind of see my personal progression is like these like little steps, these like there's like a plateau for a while, and then you're like, oh wait, there's more. And so really about 6, 7 years ago is when I really started diving deep, and started training more with other people, I was taking classes from various people more locally, but I guess training with like my first like serious classes with Kyle Lamb. And that was an awesome opportunity, which was 6 or so years ago. And that really kind of opened my eyes to the broader training community. And from there, since then I've trained with all kinds of folks. It's hard to list them all off, but like Chuck Pressburg comes to mind all of a sudden, Matt Little, Rob Latham, Mike Seeklander, Dave Spalding, some of those multiple times. I know I'm missing people. Scott Jedlinski. I've had opportunity to attend blocks with guys like Bill Blowers, or I've even been able to witness folks like Brian Hill teach. Even though I haven't attended one of his classes, but I kind of AI'd for him at the ASP conference. And Chuck Caggart I've done some training with. So I've tried to just get out there and touch a lot of different things. I've taken classes that were competition focused. I've taken classes that were of a defensive focus, and classes that were just purely shooting. I've done low light training and hand-to-hand combatives, and all kinds of things through the years. So that kind of brings me to where about 6 years ago I started getting into competitive shooting, and now that's my hobby, but also something I'm incredibly serious and passionate about. And what I primarily focus on teaching now is shooting, because I want to teach people how to shoot more gooder. Is frank, I guess what it comes down to. Like, there's so many people out there that can teach tactics classes and defensive this and defensive that. There's so many people that can do that kind of stuff, and frankly can do it better than me. I want to teach people how to shoot and how to run their guns. I want to make that part of their process as simple and as pain-free as possible, because the better you can shoot, the more bandwidth in the brain and everything that you free up to do all the other stuff. So I want to help people be able to accomplish the shooting part as quickly and as easily as possible. Businesses.
Have you found? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
You asked me some questions. I'm just trying to make sure I hit all the things.
Oh, we'll hit all the things. Yeah. I put a whole long list of all the businesses, and we're gonna talk about each one of those in a little bit later. But what I was gonna ask you was, as you said that you kind of started just locally, as most people do, you don't realize that there's a big world out there.
Yeah.
Right. And did you notice, as you kept training with more people, that the more you trained, the more you realized how little you knew?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's that way with so many things in life. The more of that rabbit hole you go down, the more you realize, oh, this isn't a rabbit hole. This is a freaking cave that I cannot see the bottom of. My flashlight only goes so far, and I still can't see. I dropped the penny or the pebble, and I'm still waiting to hear the sound of it
But
hitting the
isn't that
bottom.
kind of the exciting part of it, though? That's what I like about it, is like the deeper you go, the wider it gets. I kind of
Oh,
like
yeah.
that. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think
No,
I
it's
think
so
that's fun.
true. Even where I'm at
Definitely.
right now, like, it's a weird thing, because I think I've come to grips with, I can say I'm a good shooter. Like, it is what it
Probably,
is.
yeah.
Like, I shoot pretty well. I understand a lot of things about that. However, I still feel like I know nothing. And like, that's
Well,
such a
you
weird
shouldn't feel like you
thing.
know everything, Riley, because then you have a problem, right?
Yeah,
That's a problem.
so that's the part that keeps you digging and keeps you learning, keeps you
Right.
humble, keeps you
Right.
discovering.
Mhm.
And I've had to come to grips with also the fact that what I think today could change tomorrow, and that's a
Mhm.
and that's a weird conundrum of sorts as well, because that might make a person feel like they don't stand on a foundation. If like, well, wait, the things I think I understand today could change tomorrow, well, then what am I like? What am I standing on right now? But
Mhm.
the fact is no, I'm standing on a foundation. I may just not quite fully understand the extent of that foundation. I'm still discovering some things there. And so, um, I've had, like, recently I've experimented a bunch with shooting with iron sights more seriously again than I, had in a while. And there were some
Mhm.
takeaways from that. There's some things I'm like, okay, what I thought I understood about that 2 years ago, 3 years ago, just got
Mhm.
changed, and that's
Mhm.
that's totally okay and totally acceptable. And
Right.
that also gives us breadth of experience and allows us to speak to more things, especially if we're instructors and we're trying to connect with and communicate with students. Like, we
Mhm.
want that breadth of understanding.
Mhm.
And
And I think being challenged by other people that don't, see things maybe the way you see them, I think that's a good thing. When I was talking about being careful about the people in your life, I didn't mean cut out the critics. I didn't mean cut out the people you disagree with. I meant the leeches mostly, the energy suckers. But I think having critics and having people in your life that have alternate ways of looking at things is a good thing. So that helps all of us.
By the way, I loved your
Yeah.
message. I loved your message.
Oh, thank you.
Especially when you're talking about that, I was thinking about one of the things I've tried to achieve in my life is try to connect with as many quality people as I can,
Mhm.
and that has blessed my life immensely. And
Yeah.
it has opened doors and afforded opportunities that otherwise wouldn't have been there if I hadn't created those connections with quality individuals. And you're
Right.
exactly right that you do have to have the courage and the ability and the wherewithal to cut out the not so quality folks. And that's hard to do at times, but it's important to do.
Mhm.
So
It
I
really,
really
really is.
appreciated that message.
Well, thank you. Um, so in your experience, because you've been in this business for quite some time, and you've been acquiring other businesses recently, as I understand, what are some of the biggest takeaways and life lessons that you've learned from being in business?
So I started my first business in the construction industry in
Oh.
2005 or 6, started a home
Mhm.
building company. And that lasted a whopping 2 years because in 2008 is when
Yeah.
everything crashed and burned in a big fashion nationwide. When banks went haywire and suddenly my construction loans dried up overnight, and I was left with not a whole lot I could do. So I pursued other opportunities for a time, worked for the federal government for a bit, started another construction company in 2011 or 12, thereabouts, and ran that for 4-ish years. So starting businesses, running businesses is nothing, in fact, I knew from an early age, I'm like, I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I don't jive super well with the classic 8 to 5 working for somebody else type, role in the business world. I like to be the guy that's in charge, or at least kind of set my own course, my own path, my own destiny. And so in 2016, my current business partner, Jacob Paulson, came to me and said, "Hey, I need you to come on board." And so at that time, our business was primarily focused on training. And over the last 6, 7, almost 7 years now, it'll be 7 years in next month. Actually, that's crazy to think. We've that with a lot of that has changed,
Mhm.
and it's pretty remarkable to see how it's changed. And what I can say, so you asked about lessons learned. Um, the first thing that came to mind, and I actually was thinking of this, was you were doing your presentation, was the mantra, and can't remember the authors' names of the book, but there's a book called "Fail Fast, Fail Often," and
Mm.
I really okay. First of all, you should know I'm a perfectionist, and I don't necessarily like to fail.
Me too.
However, I have learned through experience and learned through failure that failure is important. Failure represents learning opportunities. If we don't fail, we don't learn, we don't get better, we don't grow, we don't succeed.
Mhm.
So fail fast and fail often, and don't be afraid of that. Embrace it, in fact. And that there's so many parallels to this whole community. Defenders Live, right? Like whether you're a shooter or you're just defensive minded or whatever it is whatever brought you here. Uh, you need to learn how to be okay with failing. Okay, so
Mhm.
whether it's picking up a gun and shooting, and then it doesn't go quite the way you want, well, okay, we need to identify what didn't go well. What was the failure point, and we start addressing it. It's just a absolute essential piece of life, and people struggle with failure. People struggle with the mental aspect of that as well.
I
People
don't
carry
think
a
it's
lot
the
of baggage.
failure so much as the resilience. The bouncing back part is the part that's important, I believe. I don't Yes, I think it's important to fail, but what you do after failure, I think, is more important, don't you?
Absolutely. Well, of course, of course. Uh, and that's kind of the mental side of this, because if you fail and you're just like, well, that sucked, I'm not
Yeah.
doing that again,
I'm
and
out.
it's like that's the wrong attitude, you know.
Right.
Well, I mean, there's, I guess if you touch the hot stove, that's probably wise not to do that again. But there's a lot of things it's like, no, you need to do that again, you need to
Right.
try that again,
Mhm.
and then but in trying again, you're trying to tweak what was it that didn't quite
Right.
work last time, right? And we
Yeah.
keep, it's like Thomas Edison, inventing the light bulb. Like he
Mhm.
he he had the idea in his head. He knew what he was trying to achieve, and just needed the right formula, the right filament,
Yep.
the right materials, everything to make that work.
Mhm.
And had to do that a lot of times before it finally worked, in the way that he wanted. And so, yep, it's absolutely about what you do. Like, you got to get up, you got to bounce back, and you got to keep moving forward. I am I recently I was accused of toxic positivity, which is easy to do with me. I'm serious. Like, I
I've never heard that before.
I I apologize to anyone that is offended by my toxic positivity, but all I can say is I'm an eternal optimist, and I do not quit, and I do not give up, and no matter what stands in my way, like, I will keep, like, even if it's an immovable brick wall and I'm bashing my head against it, if it's my only alternative, my only option, I'm
Right.
gonna keep bashing my head against that thing.
Right.
So, um, that's just how how I live my life. And I remember being like oh gosh, I must have been like a 9 or 10-year-old boy, and I remember reading the poem by Robert Frost, "The Road Less," or the Road Less Taken, right? Or "The Road Not Taken."
Or less traveled,
Um,
or no.
less what it you know what I mean.
I
So
know what
it's
you're
been,
talking about. Yeah.
but the important part, the thing that sticks in my mind, this is the part that I remember, is two roads diverged in a road, and I or two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one
Less
less
traveled.
traveled by. Sorry, it's been a long
Yeah.
couple days here. Um, it, it,
That's okay.
it's that concept. It's that concept of like coming to a path in my life and being like, well, that one looks sunny and green, and look at all the flowers, and there's like music rolling over the hills, and over here it's dark and scary and terrible. And I remember reading that poem and thinking, I'm gonna do as much as I can to pursue that darker, scarier, harder looking path. And that has been like what has defined my life in a
Mhm.
lot of respects. If I had always chose to took the easy path, I would not be
Mhm.
where I am today.
Mhm.
And I think I think more people need to do that. And it's hard. Like, nobody likes to go down that dark, scary path, but like that's what you have to do.
Mhm.
I think. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but my eternal optimist inside of me is like, says, it looks terrible, but I promise it's going to get better on the other side,
Get through
and
the
then, like,
hard stuff, and
and it
the
does.
sun will shine on the other side, right?
That's right. That's right.
I
Sorry,
just
looking
think
at
that
some
that
comments here.
really
Great
is.
comments.
I know, right? They're hilarious. I just think that it's more about, I think it's more about walking through fear. I just think that too many people allow fear, whether they know it or not, they allow fear to, rule their lives in ways they don't even understand. Like, they make decisions based out of fear, and I think that the path that you're talking about, is probably doing it anyway. Like, what is the John Wayne quote? Courage is, being scared to death, but saddling up anyway. I mean, I think there's some truth to that. So, well, let's
There's
move
a
on
different
here.
quote that
I've
came
got
to
a
my mind,
pile of questions
but
for you, Riley, and I don't know how the hour's going by so quickly, but probably because I flapped my jaws for most of it. So I apologize about that. I hope it was valuable. But so I'm really trying to pick out the specific questions that I feel, are pertinent here, because I have a ton of them. Um, let's see here. Because I'm kind of on the business mode here. I want to talk business a little bit, and then I want to talk training a little bit. So that's why I'm kind of going down that whole rabbit hole right now.
hey, and I've
Um,
got plenty of time, so
okay, well, I always worry about taking up too much of the viewers' time as well. But if things are rolling well, we might tip over the hour just a little bit. We'll see. So okay, you are a Master Class USPSA shooter. Like that takes some doing. So tell us about the path that you took to get to that, and what are some of the takeaways that people could learn from you? Maybe maybe they're on their own path, their own struggle, right? Everybody starts somewhere. We know that, and that's one of my favorite. I don't even know who said it. I said it. Everybody starts somewhere, and I think whether you're a master class shooter or you're a beginner, there are parallels in those paths, but you're just further down that journey than other people. What can people take away from your path to success to get to that level of shooting?
Well, it requires a lot of work and a lot of consistency, right? Like that's the simple given answer. Like uh,
The
you
non-glamorous hard work. Is that what you're talking about?
it's a
Yeah.
lot of work and you got to do it consistently. I've been
Mhm.
afforded opportunities to shoot a fair amount. I mean, nobody's paid for me necessarily to shoot. Well, I've got kind of an ammo sponsorship now, which that makes it easier. But I just have had the opportunity to spend a fair amount of time on the range and practicing and shooting. I know from some of the work that we've done at concealedcarry.com, I remember we were doing like a torture test or something once upon a time for some sites from a company that wanted us to test some sites, and the whole goal was to put 10,000 rounds through a gun, in short order, and like test these sites, and so stuff like that where like you're just basically mag dumping, and
Mhm.
it can be challenging to learn it can be challenging to learn valuable things from just like mag dumping over and over and over again. But what I noticed when I would do stuff like that, I'd start picking up on like these little patterns, these little things, that I noticed, like, my sight's doing a certain thing as I adjusted or tweaked my grip. And so actually I was fortunate in some respects with being able to do some of that, to fortunately be paying attention, because it'd be really easy to mindlessly just bop, 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 bop,
Yeah.
and just run rounds through the gun. And I would try to pay attention. You still needed to get through. I didn't have all the time in the world. We had a certain time frame to get this all done within, but trying to pay attention while I was doing that, and just make use of every opportunity to learn was something I remember trying to do. But so I don't know why I went down that tangent, but you know, I- so I started shooting
Something you learned
three.
from that.
Yeah, I started shooting three gun in 2016. And again, talking about taking the not so easy path. So I jumped into probably the most complicated form of competitive, like action, practical style, you know, competition, by jumping right into one that required proficiency with a handgun, a rifle, and a shotgun. Uh, I don't generally advise that.
You don't recommend that?
I I should have listened to a friend of mine at the time that's like, "Hey, you might consider trying some steel challenge first, and then do a little bit of USPSA, and then you can transition to some three gun or something." That was the logical path, and I was like, "No, but I want to shoot three guns. That sounds like a lot of fun." And so that's what I did. And after a couple of years of here's what I did learn from that. I learned to push myself in terms of speed. And so this is something I do think is helpful in terms of practical pistol shooting, or practical shooting, really. I guess it doesn't have to be with a pistol. Is most people that probably start, from what I observe, is a lot of people tend to be, this isn't everybody, but a lot of shooters I observe tend to be a bit on the slow side because they're being a little too careful. Well, three gun
Mhm.
encouraged me to throw caution to the wind and just go crazy, because it was like, well, put two rounds anywhere on that target and it's neutralized and you're good to go. It didn't matter if they were two deltas or what, or if you
Mhm.
just clipped the ear, it didn't really matter. Like, I got two on there, I'm good. And so I learned really fast to go fast.
Mhm.
And that, I think, has paid some dividends in the long run. However, you have to have the ability to have the discipline to know when and how to dial that back.
Throttle it
And
down,
the
yeah.
last couple of years has been that process for me, as I've tried to learn how to strike that right balance, because I always tend to try to go faster than I probably should.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's been helpful because, because what the goal here is to always put reasonably accurate hits on target in as little time as possible. So you're always wanting to push the speed envelope to some
Mm-hmm.
extent. 'Cause you want to take as so but if you can do it, then what you want to be starting to pay attention to is what is your gun doing? Like you want to be observing the visual patterns of information that are occurring in front of you as you're pushing that speed. And
Right.
then you start trying to make sense of it. And if you never
That's
push
the
yourself
problem, though,
to
is that
that
most
limit,
people, when they push themselves to speed, is they lose their brain. Their brain disengages once the speed starts hitting. This is what I've observed anyway. They can be really focused
yeah,
and intentional when they're going in a slower pace, but then when they start hitting that faster pace, and it's not just physically that they can't handle the recoil, it's mentally that they just start disengaging their brain. And it takes a lot of hard work, especially under stress, to keep your brain engaged and to keep thinking when things are going faster than you want them to go. And I believe that's truly that's a muscle that must be used, and you have to practice that, right?
I agree
To see
100%.
while you're
And I
shooting
think that,
quickly.
yeah, I think you want to give yourself permission to do that in
Yeah.
your private practice, so
Mhm.
that you can start discovering those things before you're like in the position where the stress or the whatever
Mhm.
kicks in, that
Mhm.
makes your mind go blank. uh
Right.
yeah, that is a difficult thing to do, to stay completely
Because
like
for newer
mentally switched
shooters,
on.
shooting fast is enough stress for them to go into kind of a freak out mode, to be honest. For more experienced
Yeah.
shooters, it's just shooting fast. But for newer shooters, that's enough to put them over the edge a lot of the time, where they need to dial it back and re-engage their brain, and then and start expanding that comfort zone, so to speak. And you have to
Hmm.
keep building on that comfort zone, I think, until you can keep expanding that out. To that, in my
Yeah.
opinion, I think that would be the difference between a newer shooter and a higher end shooter that's been doing it a while. They tend to have that, their comfort zone is a lot bigger.
Oh, for sure,
So,
for sure. Wherever you're at, like whatever you think, like go to. Here's what I suggest: go to the point where you feel like it's just about to start falling apart, and then
mhm,
go just a bit beyond that.
mhm.
Just
That kinda sounds like
a
what I
bit.
was talking about in my
So
little
we want to
spiel
push
about,
ourselves outside our comfort
when
zone just a little
working
bit.
out. That was kinda what I did. Was I would go to the
Hmm.
threshold of where I was comfortable. That's what I should have said. I went to the threshold of where I was comfortable, and I pushed past it just a little bit. That's
Hmm.
exactly what you're
Yep.
talking about.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
Absolutely. And then and you just you do that a little bit and start to get the hang of it, and then okay, all right, cool. And then your next range trip or session or whatever, or 15 minutes later, whenever you think's appropriate, push again, and you're just
Mhm.
constantly trying to push that on just a
Right.
little at a time. And like
Right.
that's basically what I would say. I did a lot of that accidentally on my part because I don't think I understood everything that I was doing at the time I was doing it. But
Mhm.
I think I am personally hardwired a little bit to want to go fast. And so I think I was just able to naturally like, okay, let's push that a little bit. Well, I did it this fast last time. Well, let's just go a little bit more
Mhm.
this time and see what happens. Whoa, boy, it fell apart. But let's do that again and see.
Yeah.
Oh, there's something here, like, and you just
You
start
kind of grow
discovering things
into it,
along the
don't
way.
you, over time? It's kind of
Absolutely.
a growing into it. Yeah. That's cool.
Mm.
I've never heard it described like that exactly, but that's a good analogy.
Yeah. So, it's a lot of years and thousands of rounds of doing stuff like that, and of course, a lot of dry fire. I started by just like with what everybody does of just doing practice draws, practice draw,
Mhm.
practice draw,
Mhm.
practice draw. You know, a bunch of times. Like you do need to have some proficiency of being able to draw your guns, so that's important to do. But at some point, you gotta start expanding what you're doing in dry fire. And so if you want to do some reloads, okay, do some reloads, whatever. Now I
Mhm.
spend most of my time uh, working on the visual aspects of transitions. And so I look around intentionally at things, at objects, at points of focus, and try to get my eye from point A to point B to point C to point D very quickly and very precisely, because I know if I can do that, then my gun's going to arrive where my eye's looking,
That
and that
ties
makes.
in with this question right here.
Mhm.
Laura
What do we
says,
got
I
here?
found it difficult. I found it's difficult to transition from standing still and shooting to moving while shooting. What was it that you learned that was helpful to make you more accurate? Just repetition or something more? That ties right into what you're talking about.
Okay. Looks like I lost you a little bit.
Oh, did you hear the question?
I see the question.
Oh.
I knew you were reading it, and then you cut out on me. That's okay.
Sorry.
I'm sure it was on my end more than anything. I'm using my grandma's Wi-Fi, and grandma's and Wi-Fi. That's probably not the best combo.
There's a quotable, Adam. There's a quotable. Uh-oh. We lost him. Unless, what happened? He's using his grandma's Wi-Fi, and then he... Oh my gosh. Oh, he's back. Are you back?
I think Grandma got mad at him and cut him off.
You
You know,
couldn't have timed that any better, Riley.
I started making fun of my grandma on her Wi-Fi, and I mean,
Oh man, that was the best. Oh, that was such perfect timing. Okay. All right, let's get back to the question here.
So, transitioning from standing still and shooting to moving while shooting. So, what was it that you learned that was helpful to make you more accurate? Repetition. Well, repetition is obviously a part of it. So, the thing to maintaining accuracy, uh, when we start throwing other variables into the mix, and movement certainly is a major variable, is we have to learn to make it. Well, this is assuming once we have the fundamentals of like movement down, right? Like it's important to learn how to move your body and hold a
Mhm.
gun and maintain some amount of stability. I mean, it's you're always going to have some instability while you're moving, obviously, because
Sorry, there's another
yeah.
reference to grandma's Wi-Fi. We're not going to live that down now. Okay. I'm sorry. Go
But
ahead.
you know, is once you got the kind of the basics of can I have reasonable amounts of stability while I'm moving, because maybe I'm bending my knees a little bit more, dropping my center of gravity, being careful about placing my feet as I'm moving, et cetera, like whatever that is, whatever that looks like. After that point, like what I have found for me is I got to make sure that I keep that shooting process as much as the visual one, that I am absolutely 100% tuned into my sight picture on target. And that this is hard to do because, again, we talked about how difficult it is to stay switched on, especially when we're doing things that are kind of stressful and whatnot. But it's also hard to do because for a lot of people, just all of the visual noise of everything's moving can be so distracting. It's hard to make sense of that sometimes and do what we want to do. But that is ultimately like how I'm able to shoot and move and get pretty accurate hits on target is because I'm so tuned into my sight picture. I'm waiting for that perfect moment each time. It's like, okay, things are moving and things are moving and just like it's purely I'm not sending the shots when I think I want to be sending the shots. I'm sending the shots when I actually see what I need to see to send the shot. And
Could I speak to that for a second, though? Because I
yeah.
actually don't feel the same way. When I'm moving and
Mm,
shooting, I feel like the only way that I can do it really well is I have to take away hyper focus off of the dot or the sights or whatever. And I'm practicing this on my draw stroke too, and it's really helping me. Is I'm actually trying to do the opposite where I'm looking in front of me, but my vision is opening up peripherally, if that makes sense.
mhm.
D Is
Yeah,
that
yeah,
what you do as
yeah.
well?
That's a
Because
really good question.
if I tunnel vision focus on something, especially when I'm moving, then it feels impossible to get where I need it to be. But if I work in a flow mode of my vision widens, my periphery widens
Mhm,
while I'm moving, then I can still do like what you just said. Well, and now, and now, and now. But if I get too focused on it, it's like it doesn't work for me. I don't know if I explained that well enough, but
Yeah. So no, that makes sense to me. That is all about, well, here's the main purpose for the exercise is to help shooters learn how to control their vision more deliberately. And one of the
mhm,
exercises I do is all about, we actually take their peripheral vision and we open it up and we open it up and we open it up and we open it up,
mhm,
all while they're trying to maintain visual convergence, right? Their two eyes are converged on a point on the target. Like their
mhm.
goal is to maintain that visual convergence on target the whole time while I'm telling them to pay attention to more and more things peripherally. And then we
Wow,
bring
that's
it
good.
all around and then I bring it back into the
Yeah,
gun.
yeah,
And so that I think is kind of I think that's part of the key is learning how to become more deliberate in controlling exactly what your eyes are doing. So it's really
that's like
easy
gun
for the
yoga,
human eye
Riley.
to well, I've
It
had
is, like,
people make some similar
I
comments.
just envisioned a new class right there.
Um, you know, it's really easy for the human eye to start saccading about. You understand
Mhm,
visual saccades, where we're just the eye is not really locked in on a specific point. It's kind of like we do it without realizing a lot of times. And a lot of times when people, I think, when they tell me, I have a theory about this. It's hard to always see this because you don't get to actually see exactly what their eyes are doing sometimes. But when people tell me that they're kind of getting lost in the sights or they're, or things are distracting or whatever, like I'm convinced that there's times where shooters, their eyes are saccading about and they're not looking at any one particular thing at one
that
time
makes
and
sense.
locked in on that thing.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I think some of like this exercise I just described, I think helps people start to sort of like find this zen
Zone.
place,
Yeah,
of
mhm,
like I need my eye locked in on this specific point on the target. But
mhm,
meanwhile, I can also see these other things peripherally. And what that I
mhm.
think does is empowers the shooter to pick and choose the things in their visual environment that are important to them and that they need to pay attention to. And I'll
I don't
apply that
think
to
many
say,
shooters do that. I mean, especially the newer shooters. I don't I think that's a little bit
yeah.
more advanced.
Yeah, well, so and that's an interesting
I
thing
think
is I
it kinda
have
has to be learned a little bit. I mean, it's not something I don't think shooters naturally do, especially when they're getting told front sight focus over and over again, you know? I think that and then when they go to the dot, then they're told not to focus on the dot. So, I think that makes it hard
yeah.
sometimes for
No,
them to
I
learn that.
I I completely agree with you. And that's the thing with that visual exercise I just described is we bring it to say red dot shooting on a pistol, like
Mhm.
we want our eyes locked in on a point on the target and we want to kind of see this red dot thingy peripherally, that it's just sort of there and we're observing it, we're aware of it, we're not really looking at it. And that's the key when I'm shooting on the move, especially with a red dot. I can't be trying to look at the dot because it's doing this,
Mhm.
right? It's all over the place. I have to just be point on target and then visually aware of where the dot's located. And that does take some time, take some learning. But when we go through some of the exercises like what I described, uh, it helps a lot of, I think, start to make sense for folks. I mean, I get maybe not like beginning type shooters in my classes, although I kind of experienced a little bit of that at some of the training conferences I've taught at. But I definitely get shooters of a variety of skill levels, and I see success, with my approach of kind of how I teach the visual piece of shooting across no matter who the shooter is. Really, really basic level shooters and really advanced shooters. I see people benefit from that, no matter who they are, because the fact
Mhm.
is most of us, well, we all grow up learning to see, and we do it intuitively. We don't think about how we do it. And so when
Right.
somebody actually puts some tools in your basket and say, "Hey, look, you've not really had to think about how you do this, and now I'm going to ask you to think about how to do that. And here's
Mhm.
some tricks of kind of how to do that." Then all of a sudden people are like, "Oh, wow, like now I have
Yeah.
so much more control over my vision." And shooting is
Yeah.
so visual. You
Right.
want control over your vision.
Yeah, definitely. That's really powerful stuff. Really good, Riley. I think I'll just do another question or two and then we'll get off here because it's already past the hour and I don't want to take too much time, but it's like, it's good stuff. It's really good stuff. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing this with people. So, this next question is how much does dry fire help with speed and consistency? So, what are your thoughts
So
on dry fire?
yeah, so first of all, dry fire I think is one of the best places to learn speed, especially with the gun manipulation side of it, right? Because in dry fire, we set up our dry fire dojo. We clear our gun. Maybe we use a barrel block to ensure safety with our gun, whatever it is. In other words, dry fire is a safe environment where we're not introducing ammo, we're not shooting anything, so we have permission to push the envelope of speed in dry fire. So that is a perfect time to learn speed. Now, obviously, there's some things that are harder to learn in dry fire, as far as like recoil management and tracking sights and things of that nature that we also need to learn to be able to do at speed. But all the manipulation stuff, please, please, please push the envelope in dry fire because that's the perfect place. And
Mhm.
then take it to the range, and like over time, you're going to see your live fire times are going to come down and come down and come down because you're pushing the envelope in dry fire where it's safe and appropriate to do so. What was the second part of that? It was speed and something. Um,
Um, I unstart it. So, Adam, can you find it again? I think it was Chris Brady that asked it.
I was looking too. Um, hmm,
There's a lot of
I,
comments, which is so great. I love that. But then we're having trouble finding that one
so I'm
again.
sorry if I didn't quite fully answer the question. Was it speed and accuracy, speed and something? I remember
I
there was two
think it
pieces.
was speed and accuracy, but
Oh, speed and consistency. I found it.
oh, there you go.
Speed and consistency. So consistency. Well, yeah. If I'm like, what's going to develop consistency is doing things thousands and thousands of times, right? So where are we going to get the most efficient repetitions is going to be in dry fire primarily, right? That's where we like probably one of the biggest challenges any developing shooter has to learn or get over is how to grip the gun and how to grip the gun the same way every single
Mhm.
time. Every single time. If you want consistency in how your gun performs during live fire, it all comes down to how consistently you grip the gun. You got to grip it the same way every time. Because as soon as you change your grip ever so slightly,
Mhm.
it's not going to recoil the same. It's going to move maybe higher. Maybe it's going to even maybe you changed your grip in a good way and you didn't realize it, and now it's actually not recoiling as much. And
Yeah.
that can create a challenge for you because you're all of a sudden like, whoa, like my timing is off here or whatever because the gun's back on target so much sooner than stuff like that. So anytime you change anything in your grip, it's going to behave a little differently. And so that's why consistency is so key. So where can we learn that grip consistency? Dry fire. Many, many, many
And
thousands of
Mike is
times.
talking about establishing your grip in the holster. So that's important too.
Well, yeah, of course. Yes. I mean, that is all part of it. Yeah, that's where it
Mhm.
starts, right? That's
Mhm.
this grip that's out here started somewhere else, which was back here or here, wherever you're
Mhm.
carrying that gun. So hitting the gun right from the get-go the same way, super important.
Mhm.
That's why I like discovering or developing index points.
Mhm.
Some people like using the claw grip as they're drawing from, especially like the appendix position, where they're placing the thumb across the back of the slide, like the back plate of the slide of the gun. I actually, even with the guns that don't have a large beaver tail, so I started on my SIG pistols that have a fairly large beaver tail, placing a specific point of my thumb on the corner of the back of the slide, and over time that has become an index point. And so it doesn't matter the gun, doesn't matter the holster, doesn't matter. Like every time I draw my gun, like that's an index point that I have to hit, because if I don't, I know that my grip's going to be off. And so there's that index point where my fingers wrap around, and my middle finger, and how it indexes against the trigger guard and against the front strap of the grip of the gun. All of these things, like even the trigger finger, as far as like where it lands on the frame or on the slide, stuff like that. So all of these index points help us establish consistency, and that's all developed in dry fire as well.
Now, do you do a lot of micro drills, Riley? What is your thoughts on micro drills? Yeah, because I think that if you're, especially with your draw stroke, if you're not, for me anyway, personally, those micro drills make a huge, huge difference. Could you explain to people what those are and how they can use those effectively? An example, maybe?
Well, using the index thing I was just talking about, like how do you establish that? I
But
establish
just
that
doing
in
that.
micro drills.
Yeah.
Of just placing my hand on the gun. Like, did I hit it the same way? Okay. Yep. Boom. Did I hit it? Yep. Boom. Did I hit it? Yep. Okay. Now let's move to the next step, So, well, let's just go from here to where my hands meet. To just the very moment that this support hand first touches, whether it's my hand, whether it's the gun, wherever that is, let's stop at that point. Okay. Back to the holster. And not necessarily doing the whole draw stroke at this point, but starting with my strong hand already on the gun, right? And then going from that point to where these hands first meet. Okay, back. And then, you're just going back and forth and back and forth. And then you can go from this point to full extension and making sure that the support hand gets locked in the way it needs to and consistently each time. That your sights are, that you're seeing front sight, rear sight, or red dot in the window. So you can go from here to here, from here to here, to here to here, back and forth, and just micro drilling the heck out of that. Micro drilling reloads, micro drilling malfunction clearances, all of that. If you break it up into all these different little pieces, components, steps, whatever you want to call them, and you can micro drill every little aspect of that. And the more you can micro drill it, the more precise those movements are going to become over time. And so it's really up to, like, I can give you a bunch of ideas, but it's really up to you, the shooter, the he or she who's practicing, to go ahead and like, well, what if I did this and just did this one little movement and like just practice that again and again and again. Like
I totally agree.
Break any of these down into smaller bits and pieces.
Yeah, I want all of my students to listen to this podcast, because in all my classes, I've always told them, and it's almost like most of them are like, really? Like they don't understand the importance of go home, unload your gun, get familiar with handling your gun. Like dry. Everybody's in such a big hurry to get on the range and put lead down range. That's not where it's at, guys. Where it's at is dry. You need to be able to work that gun dry, like in your sleep. And you need to know what it feels like and what the draw feels like, every little tiny piece about it. And once you get that down, then go to the range and confirm what you've been working on. And a lot of people don't get that, but that is such a huge, huge part of becoming a good shooter. So thank you for touching on that. I think that it probably would be best. Let's wrap up with, I want to talk about your businesses, because you have quite a family of businesses now through concealed carry. So talk about that. We've got those websites on the banner too that I think Adam's going to pull up.
Yeah. So we start, actually our when we first started, Jacob and I, 7 years ago, we were known as usafirearmtraining.com. And not quite a year later, we had the opportunity to purchase concealedcarry.com, which was something that we had targeted for some time and wanted to go after that. And so the first business we acquired was kind of concealedcarry.com, because what it was part of that business deal, part of that acquisition, we really just wanted the domain name, but the owners had owned it since like 1998, and they got into the business of making concealed carry vests. Like one of the owners was a retired cop. He's just this old retired guy, and he's like, I just want to be able to carry concealed with a vest, like that's the most comfortable way to do it. And so that's the business he created. and they were just smart enough, I guess, to go snag the domain name concealedcarry.com back, when it was still available easily, readily. So our deal was we had to continue manufacturing and selling those vests for, I think, up to 2 years or something like that, as part of that acquisition. So we in acquiring concealedcarry.com as a domain, we really were acquiring a business, which was not something we particularly wanted, but that was part of the deal. And even to this day, like, we continue making and selling those vests, even though we don't really talk about it or put it out there, just because we have a pretty loyal subset of our fan base, of our customer base, that they've been customers for a long time and they like their vests and they want their vests. And so we continue to make and sell and service the vest. But concealedcarry.com really then started expanding as a online store. Also a website with, blog type articles and information and resources. But ultimately it was you on the phone call. You said the Walmart of concealed carry stuff.
I know, it just popped in my head.
You said it, and I'm like, that's true. I mean, like, we want people to go, hey,
I didn't mean it in a bad way either.
I don't take it that way at all. We want people to be like, concealed carry. I need information. I need legal stuff. I need reciprocity map. I need some training resources, holster, belt, whatever, like anything that might be kind of in that space. Like, we just over time started grabbing those little components and those pieces and parts and products and started adding them into the concealedcarry.com website. And so that's kind of how we've gotten to where we are now. And then over time, as sort of opportunities have come up, the first one was Range Tech. I think it was Range Tech was the first one. Yeah, Range Tech shot timers. Some friends of ours started that company and then decided they were going to cancel that whole project. And we said, we think there's value there. So maybe we could do a deal here. And we acquired Range Tech. And then let's see, I'm probably going to get things out of order because it's all just a jumbled mess in my head. But, at one point we were like, hey, we should start we were actually doing some business and reselling some trauma kits. And we just started looking at the kits themselves and realizing, I think we could source these components. I mean, cat tourniquets, soft T wide tourniquets, gauze and gloves and pressure dressings and all, I think we could source all this stuff and put together kits and do it at a competitive price. And well, let's do that. And so we started Mountain Man Medical, and that's gone really well. Ready Up Gear was something that was started. It's a smaller known brand. Not many people are probably familiar with. We actually had different products on concealedcarry.com, and they just didn't really fit anywhere as far as they were just generically branded. They were concealedcarry.com products. And so we're like, hey, let's create a brand and bring that stuff under that brand to kind of have some homogeny there. And so our ear protection, got over the ear muffs. We've got dummy ammo. We've got little laser, dry fire, cartridge thing you can put in your chamber and use with Manus X or with their Laser Academy, or to use with Laser X, the dry fire software. And so we just started adding those kinds of things like accessories and dry fire products and things like that into that Ready Up Gear brand. Then we acquired Barrel Block in January of this year. That was pretty exciting. People are pretty familiar with Barrel Block. I think many are. And it's a strong brand with a really great but simple product. And we're thrilled to be able to be the owners and sellers of Barrel Block. Definitely recommend using Barrel Block for dry fire training, just for a little extra security and being extra safe. And then we acquired KSG Armory holsters in June of this year. And Gabe had started talking to us. Those of you that knew Gabe knew, he came to us actually more than a year ago with possibility of doing a deal there, and didn't quite happen at that time. But then early this year, I think April or May, he said, hey, let's do this again. And so we made the numbers work and did the deal, and we're thrilled to have KSG Armory holsters as part of the concealedcarry.com family now as well, to have a brand that we control, that we sell through our site. super exciting and a quality brand at that, so yep.
That's
That's basically
becoming
the
a
family of
big
companies.
family, Riley.
I will say that, I have in real life, I have 5 children and I have my
I
wife,
heard.
and that's plenty for me there. And I will say this current family of concealedcarry.com family companies is plenty as well. So no plans to
Yeah.
add anything else to the mix right now. I think we're getting the
Okay. All
tubes
right.
tied
But
on
there is one more thing
concealedcarry.com.
we haven't talked about yet. One more thing we haven't talked about, and that's the Concealed Carry podcast.
Mm.
Yes. So you're the
So
man behind the Concealed Carry podcast.
yeah, we launched that in February of 2016, 2017, 2016. Yeah, February 2016. I think that's right. It's such a mess in my head.
It's all a blur.
It'll be 7 years in February since we launched that. So we actually, I went to Jacob. I said, "Hey, man, I think we should start a podcast." And he's like, "Why?" And I was like, "I don't know, because it's a thing, and like I listen to podcasts and stuff. Like I think,
It's a thing.
yeah, and actually, what it was is I remember I was listening to a lot of photography podcasts at the time because I was kind of getting into photography a fair
Oh,
amount,
man. We
and
could have so many conversations, Riley. You know I'm a photographer, right? Did you know
yes, I've
that?
seen
Oh,
that a little
man.
bit. Yeah. So I was listening to a bunch
For
of
another day.
photography podcasts, and I just remember thinking one day, I'm like, "Oh, wonder what's out there for like concealed carry type podcasts." Like I just literally searched. I was like concealed carry in my podcast app, and it brought up
Mhm.
one podcast which hadn't published a new episode in like 3 years, and even then it only had like 20 or episodes in the first place. And I listened to a couple of them, and I'm like, "Oh, it's not very good." And so that was kind of the genesis. I said, "Hey, I there's not really a podcast specific to concealed carry issues, so let's do that." I thought it would be a great opportunity, and it has been a great opportunity because 7 years later and like 7 million downloads and
That's awesome.
700 episodes ish, somewhere in that ballpark anyway, getting close to that number. Um, and a pretty loyal following. That's been podcasts are a hard thing from like a business standpoint. If you're in a business and you're thinking maybe this would be a good thing for my business to do, it's very difficult to measure the direct benefit of a
Mhm.
podcast to your business. And we,
Mhm.
we knew that going into that, and we still understand that to today. But what I could say is just purely off of the emails and messages and conversations and people coming up to me at trade shows, it's very apparent that it has had a positive
Yeah.
effect on our business and has helped grow our business. And so it's one of those things. It's like we've been doing this like 7 years now, and it's kind of there's definitely days where it's like, oh, well, it's getting
Mhm.
kind of hard to keep
It's a
doing
labor of
this
love.
thing.
It's a labor of love, I'm sure,
Um,
yeah.
I do enjoy it,
Mhm.
but it is, it's hard, like, what are we gonna talk about this episode? Oh, I don't know. Like
Mhm.
we've kind of talked about all these things, so,
Mhm.
but we keep doing it and trying to bring quality information and content to our listeners. And it's
Well,
been
we're
great.
glad. Yeah, we appreciate you. You've been a pleasure to have on, Riley, and I appreciate your time tonight, the day before Thanksgiving. I mean, what a dude to come on and do this for us. We so appreciate it. We are way over the hour though, so I have to cut you short, unfortunately. I apologize for that, but I do so much appreciate your time. Guys, if you guys want to check out Riley, he has all the companies that were listed while he was talking about that. Concealedcarry.com would be where to go. What was the personal website? Train something shoot.
LearnTrainShoot.com is
Learn,
where
train,
someone can
shoot.
find me for my
Yeah, for
personal
training.
training and whatnot. Yeah.
Yeah. So be sure to check all of that out. That's a lot of information in one show, but we sure appreciate your time. And I'm gonna wrap up here for now. So guys, hey, next week I'm just gonna be really honest with you. I'm not quite sure what I'm gonna do next week, but I wasn't quite sure what I was gonna say in my tidbit this week, and I don't think it turned out half bad. So I think that you should just tune in next week and be surprised. And I really, really hope that you got some value and some good information tonight. I certainly did from Riley. He was a wonderful guest. So have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Make sure you spend time with those that you love. Be grateful for all of the blessings in your life. I'm certainly grateful for you, and I will plan on seeing you next Wednesday at 7 p.m. Until then,